The ideology that dominates our lives has, for most of us, no name. This is a symptom and a cause of its tremendous power. It has been a major force behind the destruction of our education system. The 2008 economic crisis, child poverty, loneliness, the loss of biodiversity, and the destruction of our environment. But for many people, these crises emerge in isolation, unconnected by a coherent philosophy, and that invisibility is the source of its power. But this is no neutral force or biological law, but rather an ideology called neoliberalism, which is capitalism on steroids.
Hello, my friends. I am tenured Professor Hans von Puppet. Welcome to Economics 101. Let's talk about capitalism, the most advanced economic system that has ever existed in world history. We have the state, a bloated and inefficient bureaucracy which kills any and all innovation, and the market, which magically solves all of our problems. There is also the commons, as detailed on page 30 of your textbook, where ordinary people were briefly in control of their own resources. That experience ended in a horrible tragedy, so we don't need to revisit that topic again. Instead, we will use cutting-edge Newtonian physics to explain how to reduce economics to a simple cause and effect system.
Universal competition depends upon universal quantification and comparison. The result is that workers, job seekers, and public services of every kind are subjected to a stifling regime of assessment and monitoring designed to identify the winners and punish the losers.
Developing algorithms to identify new patterns in data is critical to enhancing our profits. Let's take a look at how big data is changing business. Luckily for us, most people are unaware of how their data is aggregated all across the internet to build complex and lengthy files on their likes and dislikes, penchant for hot Asian porn, political leanings, past purchases. And it's not just what they post. By using machine learning identifying human patterns, we can better predict details that people don't actually reveal about themselves. Like if they've had an abortion, or are secretly gay, or have some kind of mental health issue. You can actually predict when someone is going to have a manic bipolar episode and use that opportunity to sell them exciting products like a trip to Vegas.
Chad, nice seeing you again. What are you working on?
I'm developing algorithms for banks to analyze their clients' social connections and use it to determine the prices for their loans. Now's a great time to defriend any poor people you might be connected with on Facebook. No, I'm just kidding. I know you don't know anyone poor.
Right now, every one of these applications is in the end all about monetization, and that's why we are the product on Facebook. And the real thing that's going on there is selling humans to advertisers.
Economic growth isn't just about growing at the rate of the population. Even in countries where the population is shrinking, there is still exponential growth. But if not to feed everyone, then why does the economy need to keep growing? Good question. It's to pay back debt to the banks on money that the banks made up out of thin air.
Like even if you only just take the currency, don't make it personal about the banks. We've got a Ponzi scheme currency. It's issued as debt which bears interest, and you have to issue more money next year just to service the interest on what you issued this year, so that you force the economy to grow. And the economy is coupled to resource use and consumption, and we've, in one baby boomer generation, used more than half of the world's unrenewable resources. You can't do that for another generation. And yet, we're supposed to expand it. And this is the nature of all Ponzi schemes, is when they reach their limits to growth, they collapse.
So, wait. They are liquidating the planet to pay back pretend money to corporations they don't like? That's correct.
It's the people versus the man, and blockchain technology is going to save us.
We are going to use these things called smart contracts, which is a combination of law and computer code that lets us interact directly with other people without any institutions like banks or the justice system.
Hi, I've been interested for a while in changing the ways that we relate to money. How can I get involved in your movement?
Well, if you are a computer programmer, you can make decentralized applications, or you can buy our tokens at our initial coin offering, or ICO.
I'm a carpenter, not a programmer, and I don't have a lot of money.
Well, you can't be a part of this revolution if you can't afford to buy your freedom.
What kind of revolution is that?
The problem is that blockchain, its architecture actually isn't scalable, and it won't be able to grow to the size that we need to coordinate on large scale, and it won't be able to go fast enough.
There was this incredible excitement around blockchain as, oh wow, now we can do money in a way that we don't need the banks anymore. But if you actually look at what happened, it's deeply, deeply centralized because you basically centralized all the power with the miners.
Like, it's scary to people that we've reached these levels of carbon in the atmosphere, or depletion of soil, or radioactivity in the oceans, or like there's lots of things that we can point to of being at unhealthy levels. There's just lots of converging system failures that if we don't start having ways of coordinating on large scale to make the things visible and address them and dance together in rebalancing, we're kind of screwed.
Hello, I'm Professor Hans von Puppet. Our subject today in economics is rival resources like land, air, water, and forests. Things like forests should be owned by timber companies, who we can trust to maximize the potential profits by turning trees into productive goods, like paper, which can be sold to consumers and increase our growth. Otherwise, trees will just game the system by freeloading off the rest of us. And we need to privatize water resources to efficiently deliver the water across the world to people who can afford to pay for it. If we don't, a bunch of poor people who haven't even taken this class and don't understand the logic of market capitalization will siphon it off for free just because they think they have some kind of right to drink it. Oh.
Professor Von Puppet, shame on you for perpetuating these audacious scams of capitalism. Financial markets have been devouring our shared wealth, our commons, for centuries, and this private takeover of things, which used to belong to us, is presented as an advance for humanity. The commons is a global movement to step up and reclaim what is rightfully ours. The tragedy of the commons has been used as an origin fable to dismiss the commons, but everywhere around us we see evidence of the tragedy of the market.
Well, I have tenure and you don't.
These organizations we hold up on sort of the pinnacle of efficiency, they're a cancer pattern when it comes to understanding living systems. And we have to learn to actually interoperate with flows that aren't just about get mine, get mine, get mine.
We are at a critical juncture of humanity. We are starting to surpass the hard limits of planetary resources, and if we do not bring ourselves in harmony with the Earth, we run the risk of becoming the world's sixth great mass extinction. Our fundamental misunderstanding of nature as a place where the strong dominate the weak leads to serious design flaws in our social structures and must be addressed if we are to ascend to a higher level. We need a massive reset.
For all the ways we, as humans, like to be in denial, I think we have to confront the fundamental truth that our way of life cannot continue. The things that we may have taken for true may not be true. And we need to build some healthier patterns in being able to be stewards of the planet.
Entire organizational systems can grow from simple rules, like the rules of maximizing financial gains and minimizing financial risk. These rules are based on values so deep that we have a problem even seeing them. like the idea that we are independent individuals separate from the ecosystem we live in. As Earth's stewards, we must ensure the well-being of our children and our descendants who depend upon the actions we take right now.
In a whole series of different disciplines which seem to have converged on one point in neuroscience, in psychology, in anthropology, and evolutionary biology. And they all point to the fact that humankind, by comparison to any other animal, is spectacularly altruistic. I mean, way off the scale. We don't see it this way, partly because of this crushing, stifling belief in selfishness and greed almost as a good thing, which neoliberalism has massively enhanced. And we've absorbed and internalized that story. And as a result of that and developments over many centuries, our good nature has been thwarted. And our task, we, the heroes of the story, the ordinary people of the land, who actually are much better than we think we are, is to rediscover our good nature and build it through building community.
We're going to have to change how we think about things and how we do things and what we think economies are and what we think money is and those kinds of things. And we're going to have to use resources way better.
So we have to shift from a financial economy, which says, oh, oil is cheap, we can use it a lot now, even though we're actually producing too much carbon already, to accountability systems that say, well, actually we can't use oil because of climate change. So we need to reintegrate those externalities back into the way we look at the world. We look at producing for human needs within these boundaries. If we compete, for these restricted amounts of resources, we're going to kill each other. And that's the big danger. Instead, we can say, well, let's mutualize. So, if we have a shared car system, everybody can drive, but we only need 13 times less cars. And we do the same with housing. We have a housing co-op. Does every family need a guest room? No. You get your family once a year. So let's have 3 guest rooms for 10 families. So this is kind of a shift where you say, in order to survive, I need to have everything by myself. To a vision of, well, if I trust my neighbors and my kin, then I don't have to have it. As long as I can have access to it, that's good enough.
But there's actually 4 sectors to the economy. There is the market, there's the state, there's the household, and there's the commons. And those 2 other sectors are perennially neglected. Because a household is neglected as a sector, women's work is undervalued, and it's been this way since the beginning. What was the invisible hand? Oh, it was the invisible hand of Adam Smith's mother doing all the work, which he completely ignores. And that's what was keeping the whole economy going, and still is. But then there's the commons, which it was just scarcely discussed. I mean, it's beginning to come into the discourse now, but it's been out of it for far too long. And this, most of the world was once the commons, resources owned by communities, managed by those communities for the benefit of those communities alone, which couldn't be sold off, couldn't be given away. They were inalienable resources, and they were there for the people and run by the people. And the great thing about the commons, as opposed to state provision, and I'm not saying for a moment there should be no state provision, but we need to balance it. Great thing about the commons is it fosters what I call the politics of belonging. It fosters a sense of ownership, a sense of control, a sense of being rooted, a sense of belonging to the place in which you live, which I think is absolutely crucial. And unless people have a sense of belonging and a sense of having some control over their economic and political life, they are going to go for an anti-politics which is catastrophic, which could lead to the resurgence of fascism. We're seeing that happening across Europe. And so by building belonging into our politics, and not an exclusive belonging, not the idea of we're keeping everyone out, but basically anyone who lives in a place can belong on an equal footing, and the commons belong to them, and commons is what makes sense of community. We create an economy which not only is not based on growth, is not based on the accumulation of capital, is not based on profit, but is based on delivering steady prosperity and well-being, which is what the commons have always done, but which also tells you, you are someone, You belong in this community. The community belongs to you. You are cared for. You are heard. And it's that counter to alienation, which I think is absolutely crucial to political transformation.
Holochain, by its very nature, every holochain application is its own economic space, if you will. It is its own commons. It is a pattern for people to share data, information, value, according to rules and agreements that they have made and that are mutually enforced. And it's its own space, separate from others, but easily can interface with others. And that's not a pattern that we have. It's hard right now to create a commons. All of our stuff is oriented around personal or corporate ownership of everything. How do you create commons where something is truly held on a peered basis? It's very hard. With Holochain, it is the DNA, it's the nature of the beast.
You're certainly totally familiar with web applications. You have gone to Facebook, you have used Uber, you have done Airbnb. These are all web applications. These are ways in which we have used the World Wide Web, the internet, to solve problems that allow us to work together in really interesting ways. Like Uber is fascinating, Facebook is fascinating. All of these technologies rely on a centralized model where there is a corporation or an entity in the center that holds ownership of the data and does the coordination. Holochain is a software architecture, a platform, a way of doing the same thing, but where it's done and held cooperatively. So if you think of it's a paradigm. It's a way of writing software applications that are about group coordination, but where all the parties do that together. They hold a part of the data, they hold a part of the computation, and it doesn't live in any server in any particular place. So between the world that we live in now and the possibility of this shared distributed web application space, or we shouldn't call it web application because web is what we live in now, a holochain application space, we need to have a bridge. And Holo is a way of connecting the web, the current web, to that space. So some people can start serving holochain applications and give a portion of their computer's server or their computer's computing power and make that available to the regular world of the web and connect them in as we migrate to this world of shared distributed applications.
So Holochain is this sort of idealistic peer-to-peer future. There isn't a currency built into it, where most blockchain applications or most blockchain architectures like Bitcoin and Ethereum and many others, they have a currency built into it because it's so computationally intense that they basically have to pay people to do the computation. One of the great things about the project is that we, I think, have done a good job of attracting a lot of people, not for a get rich, go to ICO, get a bunch of money project, but really attracted people because of the deeper purpose of the project, resonating with their purpose.
There's a problem that occurs when humans try to do their coordination on a medium that's enclosable. And so the primary thing we're trying to create with Holochain is an unenclosable carrier for doing communication interaction. And so what that means is, in the way people typically talk about that, is decentralized. That's how people think about, if it's decentralized, then you solve a lot of problems of there being power concentration in the middle.
Having unenclosable carriers like Holochain and Scepter for us to coordinate and organize will let us establish whole new patterns of sharing with each other, caring for each other, seeing what's needed, knowing how to respond to situations, knowing how to deal with things on scale.
One of the things that I think most of us have is this feeling of being a cog in a wheel, of being a part in a pyramid, where we are there as a function, not as a human. We see a bunch of things that are going on that the pyramid, the top of the pyramid can't see, and we're just stuck there. And it's a really stuck feeling. And I think that natural systems don't only operate in those hierarchies. They have rich networks of information flow that allow for a really complex and varied array of interactions in between all of the organisms that live in that ecosystem. And for the most part, human ones have this one pattern that's not that healthy and not that fun. And we know what it's doing to the planet. We know that. And we really have to change that. And so this is what it's for. It's for creating the information architecture for creating DNA for social organisms.
We're used to doing things on scale through command and control. And we have sort of hippy-dippy stories about the internet is going to make smart networks and all that kind of stuff, except they're still embedded in centralized servers. And we haven't really had an opportunity to have those kinds of social patterns of smart networks and stuff emerge because they haven't had a way to truly be peered, to truly hold things together and make sure everybody's following the rules and have an immune system to kick out bad actors, malicious nodes, and detect corruption and that kind of stuff. And Holochain does all that. It's modeled all on natural systems, the way our body does this with cells and such. And I think that's going to be a bigger game changer than we can imagine.
So here's what I hope for. I watched many people, and I have had I've had this experience as well, live their lives from a place of putting aside what matters because they have to chase the rent. They have to chase the money. And I think that is not actually the way the world needs to run. That's a consequence of the social patterns that are embedded in a lot of the architectures of our current world that are changeable. And so I think the world, from what I would call from a felt sense, is this thing about not being as much in the rat race. I think a lot of people have this idea that, well, it's real. You have to be in the real world. The real world is a dangerous place. It's a place of competition. But my experience is that that's not true, that's actually the constructed world that we're in. And it's a result of a bunch of constructs that we have the possibility of unconstructing if we can get the root layers of our interactive substratum straightened out.